Okay, is it time?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, okay. See, I used to, I try to hide it.
We'll get it over there. We're good. We're good.
Good evening. Hello. Yo. I feel like a Rotary meeting. Good evening, and thank you all so much for coming today. The staff and this gentleman particularly, and all have so much to say about this whole process, and it is a process. And thank goodness for processes, right? You'll see everything that's up on the wall. And I think there's stickers, but this is your town, this is your community, and we want your feedback. And given the feedback, then we can go back and tweak what needs to be tweaked and change what needs to be changed. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for your interest in this wonderful community, and I appreciate y'all being here. And I'll turn it over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you all hear me okay? Good. I was born a soft talker, so this has been a lifesaver so far for me in my profession. Let me also add my welcome to, my name is Matt Duncaster, for those of you I have not met yet. I own a consulting firm called City Explained. We've been hired by the town of Southern Pines about 11 months ago. So we're here about 11 months in to a planning process to celebrate the fact that we have our first version of the product out, which is the document. What I'm going to do today is go through a very high-level brief presentation, introduce everybody, kind of set the table is the way I've said it before. And then I'm actually going to have you stay in your seats, and I'm going to do a quick lap around the room and also introduce to you what's on all of the walls and what it's meant for and how you're supposed to interact with it. Then I'm going to stop and we'll have a question and answer period as a group. And then after that, we want to break, and I want you to really mingle with the different boards and things that we have. And as the mayor had mentioned, we've got some ways for you to interact and provide some feedback with some sticker dots or some sticky notes and those kind of things. And I'll explain that as we go through the process. But let me just start with the quick presentation that I wanted to give. And this is to make sure we all have the same foundation. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and thank you for coming back yet again. I see some new faces in the room, which is great. Hopefully the fact document is now dropped. It really kind of gets everybody interested, because now that you can react to something, it's not just kind of dreaming out loud and dreaming out big, but actually reacting to words in the document makes it very real for more people in the community. So it's great to see some new faces as well. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start with some opening remarks, and then I'll make my way around, and then we'll have a chance to talk back and forth as we go through the evening. Just so I mentioned it multiple times, also, if you weren't able to make it, because I know we're being live streamed right now and the like, we will have an office hours event. So those of you who had been part of the Growth Choices workshop series that we had know that we just kind of set up. This time we're setting up at the train station, and we'll be there from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Correct, staff? 9 to 5 at the train station tomorrow. And we have no agenda and no presentation. We're just sitting there. As people come in, we'll interact and talk about the plan. Maybe you own property, you want to point to that property and really understand what this plan does for you or might make you nervous about. Maybe it's certain policies or initiatives, or maybe you represent a special interest within the community. We can just interact and we can just talk about it. We'll have a second event like that in this exact same room on August 2nd. And I'll go through that as well. But so those are two more options in order to get back together and kind of mingle again face to face. But so where we are in our planning process is we finally have the product, the first version of the product that we call the public draft. So up until this point, we've been process, and we've really just been working through and grinding different ideas, hearing different viewpoints, looking for connections between them. This was the first time we put pen to paper and tried to navigate all those opportunities and challenges that are facing the community. And really that's what we're here for this event and the series of events, is to look at the document itself. So we did have a planning process that we followed. Again, we're in month 11 right now. And as we looked at it, we do what you would probably do for anything that's brand new to you. Again, I should have mentioned I'm not a Southern Pines resident or business owner. I'm a consultant, a national consultant who happens to be able to drive here. Usually I have to get on an airplane. I'm actually from the North Charlotte area. And actually, I just recently moved to Camden, South Carolina, if any of you want to know about that place. But the way you do this is just what we call the rational planning process. And it's probably the way you would redesign a kitchen, or you might redesign your yard or something of that nature. It's to involve as many people as you can, get as many fingerprints as we can on something. We get data and information and try to educate ourselves, especially us coming from outside. And then we brainstorm ideas. And then those ideas start to stick on the wall and they coalesce around some of the comments and the things we're hearing. And all of a sudden you have a document that starts to be written. And to be very clear as well, this is not a document where I'm standing up here in sales mode. This is a document to say, out of transparency, it's a public draft. That's what it's meant to be. And so the comments that we've been taking since June 30th, if you're in the audience, I forget the name, but there was one woman who had comments in like within 2 days. So they downloaded immediately and read the whole thing and gave us her comments, a lot about bicycle lanes and the like, if I remember correctly. But we're taking all that information in. We will revise the document again before we even start the adoption process. It'll be called the public hearing draft at that point. And again, if you haven't registered yet and you just want to keep checking the website, which is southernpineclrp.net, and there's a tab at the top called the adoption process. And that's how you can keep track of the latest draft and all those kind of things that are happening. The other thing is, just because it is over 200 pages, when we do make changes, we will highlight it in a yellow box so that you can find what's changing versus having to hunt and peck and hope that you can memorize 2 different versions of a document. So we do try to bring it all to light. The success of this document is if you know what's in it and then you want to go support it. And so that's kind of what we try to do in our process. So again, we have followed a process. We're almost finished with the process. A couple of things left to do. It makes it sound easy. Adoption's the hardest part for obvious reasons, but we've done a lot to lead up to that point. And for those of you who have been with us from day one, like I said, about 11 months ago, you'll know that this slide was used then, and it's been often and everything else since that time. And it's kind of our general strategy or approach for how we tried to complete this project. So the first thing is community input. We have tried very hard to build this process and this project from the ground up, a very grassroots type led effort. For those of you who may have pulled our contract, you'll notice that we did way more than was in the contract because we were trying to be opportunistic, and it just made sense to do it. And our belief as a consulting team and the like is that if we do those investments, it should make this part of the process a little bit easier, or at least there's understanding. So that's kind of what we did there. The data and analysis I'll go over as well, like kind of some of the existing information we got. We also did some, I joked about fortune telling with the scenario planning. And then there's some best practices. You have some challenges and opportunities put before you that we've addressed in other communities before already, because either they've grown faster or they've had that issue for longer. Those, so we provided some information, some feedback about how those folks have interacted with as well. So in terms of fingerprints on the document, we've had a lot, and that's always tried to plan more if we can. Some of it has been formal, like right now where I have a microphone in front of me. A lot of it's been informal, and we've tried very hard to meet people where they are. We've tried to be more casual and just have real planning conversations. And I actually think the strength of the document is based off the number of we've been able to have on it so far. We also took advantage of a lot of other people's meetings. We just tacked ourselves on to other things that were going on. So we were able to be at the holiday celebrations. We were able to be at the Friday night events. We were able to just kind of pull people aside for a few minutes here and there, just make sure we interacted with them. And I think, again, it got us more voice in the process, and I think the product is better because of it. Now, if you're a numbers person, this is just, to set some magnitude, order of magnitude of what we've done. We did have a formal workshop. We actually started it out what we called our BYOQ, our Bring Your Own Questions event. And we just said, come meet us, talk to us, tell us what's on your mind. And then in this room, we had what we call the Community Ideas Exchange. So if you remember, it was kind of the planning fair. We had games and things to interact with you all on. We did have a community advisory committee. We met with them 5 times. There are some of those folks in the seats right now. We thank them once again for the time and the comments they were able to provide. We had 57 separate, what we called community conversations, where we interviewed people, and then they said, hey, you should talk. So we doing that, kind of like what's called a Mandeville technique, or almost like a snowflake. We just went in different directions as opportunities brought us, and we ended up having 824 different comments voiced that way. We also said we're not so proud that other people should lead their own meetings, and so we had an on-the-table initiative where we had a meeting packet that asked people to think about what your community might be like in the future, and they turned stuff into us, and we had 11 of those events. Again, we tried to capture on to as many special events as we can, so we just would say, hey, can we get 5 minutes on your agenda, or can we set up a booth here? And we tried to do as much as possible. For those of you who are part of the Growth Choices community workshop series of events that followed, you'll notice we had a lot of good feedback. We had 6 different futures that we put out there. People got really excited about them. Some in a positive way, and some people feel threatened by some of those. And that was on purpose. We tried to put a lot of choices out there for the things we were hearing. But we had 268 people respond to a 30-question discrete survey. We had over 1,100 open-ended comments and 301 little sticky note comments. So we were able to sift through all of that as well. Here we are now with our draft plan recommendations workshop. As I had mentioned, we have the event this evening, which is kind of the big official event. Then we have 2 office hour events, and then we have a way to interact with you through email and other things I'll talk about in a minute. And then we are making sure that the policymakers, whether it's planning board or town council, kind of know what's coming up and what our process is. We've been interacting there as well. If you're more of an online person, I was able to pull today for a community in the 15,000-ish range, going up to, let's say 19,000. We had 4,500 different hits on our website, and it was great. And if you look at it, it spiked when it was supposed to spike. So when we dropped in February the book reports, remember I called them the book reports, we had a huge spike. And when we released the report, we got a similar spike. So there is a component of this community who really likes to be able to interact online and get information that way. So I think we've had some success that way as well. Now, if you are interested, we do have these book reports that are still out there. In the document itself, we reference them as supporting material. But this is, I think, 160 pages or something, and it would have just made the document twice as long for really nothing, because in the end, when you go ahead and evaluate a new opportunity in front of you, getting to know some of this book report stuff really just kind of clouds your mind. It's just a thicker document. So we have all these published, and we reference them in our comprehensive plan, but we didn't actually include them formally. So just be aware of that, but they are available. And then again, I've mentioned a couple of times now our Growth Choices initiative that we had scenarios A through F. Again, because I recognize so many faces in the room, you know that we went through different choices that were available. And they were all the way from, there are people in the community who just say no growth, like let's just not grow anymore, all the way to different opportunities to grow, to face different challenges or create new opportunities. And we went through a whole gamut of those as we went through. And when you get to the plan itself, we took the parts and the pieces of those scenarios that people reacted to. And if they reacted positively, we tried to incorporate them. If they acted negative, we tried to understand why and mitigate some of those issues when we came up with the scenario that's in the plan right now. Now, I do just want to mention sort of in the section that you can go back to the project website. Again, Southern Pines, clrp.net. Section on plan adoption, or draft plan for review, actually right here in this section. If you scroll through there, those are all the different ways we can interact on this project and this plan. Right now, we're just trying to hear, in my simplest terms, I just say, did we get it right? Right? I mean, that's what the public draft is about, is did we get it right? Did we hear you? Did we think of everything? As you're moving so fast, is there a specific parcel or property that we need to go look at again? Those kind of things. That's all on the table as we look through this process. If you scroll all the way down and you don't want to do the in-person stuff, you can email us. And it's to Rachel Mann, who's in the back. It's her email, and I'm asking you to copy me directly because I want to see everything that's coming in. And so you can email comments in that way as well. All the way up until our last event is August 2nd, and we're preparing for the planning board agenda packet on August 4th. So really up until that time, and then we have to put a public hearing draft out at that point in time. Just in case anybody's nervous, even at that point in time, Goes to the official planning process of going to planning board. They would have to make a recommendation. It goes to town council. They would go through a public hearing process. So even then, if you see something in the public hearing draft, it just means you have to come to the meetings and stand at the dais and voice your opinion. All the way up until it's adopted, amendments can be made. So just understand, this is a work in progress document as we go through it. So then the other thing I want to do is just make sure everybody understands the concept I use is running through the finish line. So this has been a great process. We've spent a lot of energy on it. I think there's excitement on some of the things we've talked about, but we're not done yet. And if we just leave you with this comprehensive plan, some of the things you hope to see come out of the ground, or some of the things you hope to be, so things don't come out of the ground, won't really happen yet until you follow through on some of these other things, if that's what your intentions are. So if you kind of think of throwing a pebble into water and watching the ripple effect, once you finish this comprehensive plan, the next thing sort of up for discussion is the Unified Development Ordinance, which is your zoning and subdivision regulations. The short way to say it is everything in the comprehensive plan that says should and could becomes shall and will when it gets into the ordinances, right? So at that point, it's law. Up until that point, it's policy. And to be very clear with you, in North Carolina, the way these plans are, they're required. They're required in order to have zoning, but they're not subject to judicial review, which basically means there are some communities in the state who just don't follow it. They still defer to their zoning when they do all their decision-making. Telling you very clearly that this document is supposed to get us organized, get the compass pointing in the right direction, but we have to go through this UDO process, this Unified Development Ordinance process, to really make these things more concrete. We also have the idea that growth advocated for in certain ways or intended outcomes that are spelled out in the plan. When that happens, you have to coordinate and have capital projects that might support that demand that's being created by different growth development patterns. So there's capital projects on the town side that you'll be thinking about as you go forward, as well as what I call your partner projects. So, for example, you've got Moore County Schools, or you have Moore County Utilities who does your sewer service. You need to coordinate with those folks as well and make sure they're well apprised of what's going to happen and when, so they can prepare, right? Because you want to have enough electricity. You want to be able to flush your toilets. You want to be able to have your children go to school. So there's a lot of partner projects that have to go on as well. And you just see some of the initiatives kind of around the outside that might be coming up next, or a preview of coming attractions. And again, two of them really faced on this Unified Development Ordinance initiative. I'm calling it the Sandhills MPO. I don't know if it has an official name yet, but for those of you who don't know, there's a new regional transportation organization that's coming. It's mandated by federal law because as a region, you've passed the 50,000 population mark. As part of that, they get a lot more federal money called PL funds, planning funds, and we have set up a document to spend their money for them. If they need to spend their money, we have a plan we'd like to have done. We'd like to look at bicycle and pedestrian. We like to look at congestion. So we've set that up already as we go through. And again, if there's some nonprofit group opportunities for partnerships, we want to look for those. Other master plans. So again, if the utility company or schools want to plan their future, we'd like to make sure they understand what the intentions are of the town. So we're starting the process with the comprehensive long-range plan, but we're actually not finished with anything because it has to partner with all these other things. The other thing I just want to be clear on as we have our conversations today is the comprehensive plan is like painting more with a broad marker, right? We generally try to get it right. We think about everything. We don't leave anything vacant because if an opportunity comes forward, you want to have a position or an outcome in mind. But it is a little bit more broad brush, like the picture you see on the left. So looking at the tulip fields, you're up a little bit higher, but you understand how the colors interact, how the shapes interact, and everything is supposed to make sense within a framework. On the right-hand side, you see what it's like when you really dive into the Unified Development Ordinance. Now you're looking at things like, how many parking spaces do I need? What kind of landscaping? What can my fence material be? Where do I get driveway cuts? All that stuff is thought about at the zoning and subdivision level, not at the comprehensive plan level. So some people get frustrated because they're like, yeah, we love everything in the plan. It's like, well, you can't because you have to go through that extra level of detail in order to have predictability, both on the applicant side and the town side, before you know really what's going to happen. So just to be very clear with that. So as an example of kind of making that and operationalizing that, within the comprehensive plan, we have maps where we might only have, here we have 6 different colors. We have way more than 6 different zoning districts. So these zoning districts nest within some of these colors, and you might have multiple zoning districts that can implement one of the colors on the conservation and development map. And so that's just kind of how the world works as we set this up. But we do try to provide just a few seeds within the plan that will grow within the UDO. And so there's some predictability. There's some decisions, at least to get the ball rolling now within the comprehensive plan, that will have to be refined within the UDO process. And just to give you an example, so not to jump ahead because I'll go around the room, but there was this idea of character districts. And the idea of character districts started out of that Growth Choices workshop discussion we were having. It made it into the plan. During the survey and the comments we got back, they said, yeah, we do think there are of different parts of Southern Pines that we should think about. And so it made it into the plan. Well, then all of a sudden when you get into the UDO, there might be, well, if you design a building in one district, maybe it looks a little bit different than the other district. And just, it could be little things like, you know what, if you're in horse country, do a split rail wood fence, just to kind of keep with the character. If you're in another area, maybe you do more of a 40-inch aluminum black fence, you know, and it's just, I mean, there's just different little things that'll reinforce that you're in one part of town over another. Now, you already do this, so we're not just like creating a whole new world for you. I'm sure all of you know section 4-10-4 of your Unified Development Ordinance, or you can go look it up. You know, and if you had the stamina, it's like page 203 of 301 page. I mean, it's deep. But these things about within certain geographies right now, you're already thinking about some of that stuff. And so some of the that are in the comprehensive plan now can influence the UDO. Other times there might be pictures that are within the comprehensive plan that get in the UDO. And then other times, and this is all out of your current UDO now, so we're not changing like the main structure that you're set up to be, but they also have built examples to try to create that predictability of character. And the idea with the comprehensive plan is you might have more flavor now of where this applies because you have all the character districts that are established. So we're not asking you to really like just totally change everything you've done, but it's how do things mature and expand and create new. So let me move now to just a couple of the big ideas that are in the plan while I'm standing in front of you, and then I'll kind of show how some of those are implemented as we go around the room. So for those of you who've been part of the planning process, it should be no surprise that the proclamation was made as we interacted together that we really wanted to lead with character. So the character district idea we just talked about is one way to implement that. But we felt if we got the character right, things like the land use, the infrastructure, and other quality of life variables kind of fall in place if we know what kind of character we're trying to do. So a lot of the ones we did years ago, we'd jump right to the land use. What is the land use? And if you remember when I used to have conversations with you all in previous meetings, I'd say, you could take a chain restaurant and put it in 4 different context areas and you get 4 different experiences with that place. And that's why we wanted to start with character to make sure we got first and then let the land use fall within. Now, I kind of made it through all 200 plus pages, but on page 1, it was sort of asked of us to just say, put your challenge out there. Like what is the challenge that this document is trying to address? And so we tried to capture very succinctly kind of all the different voices and things that we heard. And there's a lot of worry and angst how fast you've been growing over these last several years. And so the mainstays of this plan not to stop growth as we went through our process, remember scenario A, B, but to manage it, to do it on the Southern Pine terms, right? The character that you want, those kind of things. So this plan is not saying growth, but it is setting the terms for which you want to accept it and manage it and implement it. And so that's there as well. And so it just through the process, and it talks about safeguarding character, the town brand, the community culture. And again, those are easy things. We heard it from a lot of different people as we went through. And then we go and actually say, well, all right, tell me up front, what is the purpose of this plan? And it's what I just told you. It's to organize and create a framework, but not be the last sentence of any one of these topics or issues. There are things that implement it, and we say that right up front. Now we want to get your reactions to this. This is what's called the shared vision, and we'll have that, and I'll show you that in just a minute. This actually started within the town branding initiative, if any of you were part of that and remember that. And there was a story before the famous first version of the icon came out, and as it was revised, this story was presented with it. And so we said, there's a lot of good in that story, but we want you all to react to that again, right? Because there wasn't formal action taken by town council during the branding process on this story. So it's still all up for interpretation and reaction, but that's where this came from, was from the town branding initiative that we had. Now again, I'm only a couple of pages, and I'm not even, remotely trying to think you're really that you're really interpreting what's on the screen. It's really just to have a benchmark for me to speak to. But these pages are blown up around the room, so you can really get into it. But I just wanted to mention here a couple of things that came out to set the table. One was we did talk about the fact that there is diminishing land supply with town if you're looking way out. And I mean way, way out, even past 2040. And there was this idea about community character that really we wanted to reinforce. So we wanted to actually minimize land disturbance and be purposeful with where we wanted to grow, were there utilities available or could be available, how much growth did we want to accommodate, and those kind of things. And then also the fact that in new growth, new development, we really wanted to embrace this idea of mix of uses and intensity. So if you remember scenario F, there was the idea about creating almost like town centers and communities and things where you have a lot of greenways and the housing can connect to a little node of retail where you can walk to, and it has greens where it's not just the leftover triangle in the corner of the parcel, but it's actually a center and a discernible center as part of it. So we do have a lot of belief and faith in that and what activity centers. And then when you're looking at the amount of growth, we are looking at about 2% per year. That is slower than the last couple of years. If you listen to the Triangle Business Journal, they say you were at 3.4%. And I think if you all think back to some of the development applications come through, you might even think it felt even more than that. You might have felt 10% or something like that. These things keep coming and coming and coming. But we ended up settling on about 2%. So again, we're not hiding it right now. 19,000 people now. If and when this plan were to be realized, you'd be up to about 27,000 people. Well, how do you fit all of that? Well, you remember from the scenario planning process, we have about 1,200 lots that have already been created, just nobody's built on them yet. We have some redevelopment focus in the US 1 corridor, and then we have 3 kind of purposeful expansion areas in order to accommodate that population. Now, if you remember from other conversations I've had with you as well, all the worlds have to align for that to occur, right? Property owners have to want to develop. The developers have to be online and want to invest time and patience and their money on that. The government and the town in this case has to have its rules and regulations agreeing to that. The banks have to be able to lend it, right? Because if you can't get financing, the project doesn't happen either. And you have to have the demographics. So whatever you're trying to build, those people have to want to come here. And so only when those 5 things sort of align does growth kind of take off and happen. And so even though we are accommodating this much growth, there are some things that have to actually happen and be realized. And so it's not a given to get to this number, but that's what we've accommodated or prepared for as a community. And then we close out this section with a user guide. So, okay, community, you've got a document in your hands. What do you do with it now? So one thing here is we're also very eyes wide open to treat this document as a playbook, right, versus a blueprint. And if you remember and you have a clock and you have to follow 99 steps to build the clock, but you skip 1 step, the clock doesn't work, right? And none of us are so good at our jobs that we know exactly in 2040 what the world's going to be like, right? There's a lot of curveballs that come at us. So we've actually set up the document acknowledging that. And there's actually a spread of 2 pages in there that talks about how the plan can be amended. So if you have a rezoning, this is how you should follow it. If you have a map change, this is how you should follow it. And so it actually understands or recognizes that flexibility is a good thing. Now, there are certain parts of the document we say should be flexible, and there are certain parts we say should not be updated until you do this planning process again. So even then, we're not saying don't ever, ever, ever update something, but there are some things you need to go through a community planning process like the one we're going through now before you make that change, not doing it because of specific development applications there and you just kind of unravel everything you've done through a process like this. So there are some kind of checks and balances as you go through the process. We do talk about being a champion of the plan. Even if you don't agree with everything in the plan, there's got to be something you're excited about. Go be an advocate for that and really try to get it implemented as you go through. Also understand the elements of time. There are some things we're proposing in the plan that just won't happen tomorrow. They need some time to mature. You have to get those 5 components aligned, for conservation or growth to occur. And then again, help make it happen. Everything I've seen from this community is you're doers, and people volunteer and you give out your time and things. And so we're saying just keep doing that. In other communities we work in, sometimes the larger communities, they just assume somebody else is going to do it for them. And I challenge you all to all be part of the solution as you go through implementation, and I know you will, so we'll be in good shape. All right, so as I kind of end this opening presentation, for those of you who are like into small bubblegum cards and you want to turn it over on the back and kind of know what really is the x-ray of this plan, right now we're at 218 pages. I'm willing to bet a fresh, shiny dollar bill that it will be larger than that by the time we're done. When we get comments through a process like this, these documents tend to grow, not shrink. So we probably will have some additional content that's added. Right now, there are 77 different policies and recommendations, mostly in Chapter 5 of the document. There are 12 different maps that help guide spatially direction from the plan. We have 5 what we call focus areas, and those are the drawings in the back corner, and I'll introduce those to you here in just a minute, but it's actually testing the words and saying if we apply them, what do we get out of it? And so we do that through our focus areas. There are 7 different matrices that try to make a connection between the comprehensive plan and the UDO that we have. Believe it or not, there are 61 different hand renderings that are in there. I call that our cartoon pictures that are in there to try to provide clarity to some of the words that we have. And we have 137 different photos because sometimes the words aren't enough. From the UDO example I gave you, you're already using pictures to help reinforce the words. We're doing the same within the plan. And then there's 7 figures that if we have to actually draw something to really understand the concept, we did that as well. This is what we call the public draft document before it becomes the public hearing draft document. I think a lot of this stuff will change. Again, history tells me it'll grow. It won't shrink. All right, so with that, I thought maybe what I would do is just quickly go around and just like this gentleman who's like, what am I looking at, right? If we were to just break, you'd be like, well, what do I do? Like, what is this event all about? And so what I thought I'd do, because I thought it worked well at the Growth Choices Workshop when we called the Audible, and remember we did the theater in the round for those of you who were here and we just turned around? I said, I've got a microphone and I can walk, so we're going to do the same thing. And I'm going to go and just sort of introduce each of the chapters to you, what's on the wall, and how you interact with that information. After that then, and stay seated for that, just turn your heads as we go around. After that, we'll have the question and answer period where we can just ask big questions of each other back and forth, and then we'll break and we'll actually have you interact in the ways I'm describing at the different stations. So, cool? All right, I don't need that anymore. All right, so we're going counterclockwise as we go through this. So if you're a person who loves order and you want to go through the same way the document is set up, start here. And you want to go all the way around. But you can jump around. If there's a real big mass of people here, go start another chapter. It's fine. Just go ahead and work around. So in this section, this is what we call sort of our preface statement. So this is chapter 0. And again, this is because we want to kind of set the table. And we said, that's a really good idea. Let's do that. So a couple of things that are going on. That whole how to use the document, I went very fast over that. If you want to read through sort of the mandates that we're putting out there for people. And then what we've also done for you is understand there are people in this room that are super, super busy. And if that's the case, what I did for you was, even if you can't document, I pulled out all the sentences that at least initial author, I felt you needed to hear. You needed to see them. You need to react to them. So these are all the sentences that either take a stance on something or form an opinion on something. And I literally raised them out. So when you see these things that say important statements, that's because I pulled them out of the plan for you to react to. So if you can't read the whole plan, I at least want you to give reactions to these. As part of that, we have red dots and green dots. If there's a part of a sentence or a paragraph you like or don't like, put a red dot or a green dot to the right of that sentence so we can start to see consensus in the room, and we'll use those same figures all the way through this process, the draft plan workshop. But we want to kind of get your reactions. And I understand this is a long document to read, so even just reacting to these will help us kind of calibrate the plan before we get into the public hearing draft. But as part of that, it's things like that vision statement. So that vision statement I showed you, we actually took it out, and literally each piece is here, and we want you to react to it. The challenge that we had is up at the top of that board. Think about it, react to it. Let us know if it needs to change. We also, within that section, I didn't go over it because I wanted you to be able to read it, but we took forward what right now, and just to be very clear, the consultants draft top 10 initiatives, right? As we go through this process, and I get to that other side of the room, I'm going to tell you how you're going to have influence on that. These 10 might change. But we just wanted it so that if you can't read 200 pages, or the elected officials need to be reminded some point during budgeting or something like that, what are these top 10 things we're trying to achieve with this plan? You can find it in one-page spread right at the beginning of the document. So again, this is about the challenge, the vision, the top 10 initiatives that we have, and the user's guide. How do you use this document? So all that stuff is in the preface statement. Cool? All right. For tonight, chapter 1's light, because chapter 1 is really just setting up. It's the formalities of the planning process. So what state law are we following? What is our planning area? We did bring that page out to you because we thought that might be interesting to you to know, like, we are looking at the extraterritorial jurisdiction, and some of you who are in there really know what that means, and town limits, right? So those two things combined is our planning area. And we can go over in more detail kind of what that means when we break up. But the document itself, and just so you know, at each one of these, this is like a table of contents of what's in that chapter. But so we talk about the emphasis on community character. We set the table again for how the document is organized going forward. Then we have to go through our formalities of, what laws are we following in North Carolina? Where are we applying this, our planning jurisdiction? That idea I told you about the 5 things, the government, developers, the banks, property owners, and demographics, that's all in this chapter as well. I told you in the challenge statement, we acknowledge we need more than just this plan to get to finality on certain issues and opportunities. So we talk about the library of other plans and ordinances the town has right now, in which we have to rely on. And then this plan consistency determination. We wanted to make sure that we didn't leave it up to chance how you use this plan in certain instances. So like we talked about, if a rezoning case comes in, how do you use the plan? If you want to change the map, how do you use the plan under the playbook mindset? Those kind of things are there. If you want to apply for a grant, how do you use the plan? We really just wanted to lay it right out there so everybody understood and knew how this works. So chapter 1 is needed, but it's not the super exciting chapters, right? But just so you're aware, so that's why there's not as much here. The other thing to mention here, just so you know as I'm going around, you may read certain things on the pages, or you might look at certain maps or pictures and you might say, I really like that. Or you're like, I really dislike that. Might even hate it, right? Or I have a question, like what you're saying, I don't understand what you're trying to get to. Like, what's your point? We have these sticky notes here that you can leave us comments, just like we did for the Growth Choices workshop. You can leave us these comments, and that's as good as providing a comment on the document. We will take these in and log them as well. So just know you can do that all the way around the room too. All right. Chapter 2, you can stay right there. Chapter 2 is a big one. If you look, it's what we call our growth and conservation framework. And this is where we're trying to provide organization to the entire planning jurisdiction. We have to do it through maps, but we also do it through words. And so we have 3 general maps that are in this section, and all 3 of them need to work together to get an answer for what can we do on this property. So the first one we have is what we call our general growth framework. It's the most broad. But if you're concerned about how much change is going to happen in my area, my neighborhood, my community, this corridor, this is the first map you go to. And there's areas to preserve, which means they should really stay as they are today. There's areas to enhance, which means there are certain strategic investments that might make life better there. Maybe it's adding sidewalks, maybe it's fixing an intersection, those kind of things. Then we have areas to strengthen. Those are areas that are really on the right path, but they might need something a little bit more investment. Maybe it's an additional land use or something like that. A great example, because of where we're standing in the world today, is we talked a lot about in West Southern Pines about all the old businesses that used to be here. Remember, 200 plus businesses in West Southern Pines. And so, but as I peeled the layers of the onion back, it wasn't like they were brick and mortar stores, but they were part of people's residences. And it was things that they did and wares that they had and they could sell and trade and barter. We have this idea of what are called accessory commercial units, right? And so we try to bring some of that back in a way that is consistent with the character that we're trying to get to as well. So those kind of things might be in a strengthen category as we talk about it. We heard some people talk about how what's on the east side of Pennsylvania, like why does US 1 just magically make it all stop? So how do we bring some of that on the west of Pennsylvania? So, and then there's these areas that transform in the blue. So those are the areas where the most change is anticipated because of this document. So that might be encouraging to you, or it might just scare the heck out of you. But at least you have a map now where everybody can be on the same page of like more change or less change and more intense or less intense. And there's a map now to make sure everybody's on the same page for that. We also have all these circles that are called activity centers. And we have different classifications of activity centers. So if a rezoning or something comes in, this should help provide some guideposts for kind of what was the intention of that area. What is the gravity that we're looking for and the mix of uses and densities and intensities in that area. Framework map is there. Now, the way the document is written, the general framework map should not change until you go through another planning process like this. So before this, your last process was in 2016. Now you're in 2023. The next time you do it, this should be up for discussion. But until then, it's too hard to keep moving the cheese, so to speak. And so we think that this is kind of like, I've called it a backflow preventer as well. So this should provide a general high-level order for the community until you go through another community-led planning process. It then leads to the second map, and the second map puts more meat on the bones, right? And it's starting to say, okay, if I'm looking straight down on properties within Southern Pines, what is the general goal? What is the aim of those properties? And we have 6 flavors to choose from, right? Open space, rural living, neighborhoods, employment centers, retail centers, and mixed-use activity centers. And that's just kind of trying to get the vibe, like what is this place supposed to be? The discussions that we have about them talk more than just about land use, but about character, the relationship of development to each other, how it's connected, those kind of things. But that's kind of step 2 in the process. So am I in an area that should change or not change? And then what kind of change are we talking about, or what do we have in place to work with? That's the second map. Then the third map that we have in the very corner is called the character district map. And that's again recognizing that if you jumped into the places within Southern Pines, what is the look, feel, brand, and overall character that you have in these places? And we're recognizing that that's different. Actually, it's amazing how well you're kind of organized with distinct things you can look at and say, oh, I'm in this place, I'm in that place. A lot of places, it's just suburbs and then rural because it hasn't been suburbs yet. But you have very distinct, horse country is so different than West Southern Pines, is so different than downtown and the neighborhoods that are around downtown. I mean, it's just very cool. And so we wanted to honor that and really memorialize it in the plan. So what we then do is we say, within those areas, there might be little things you should do different to reinforce the character that's there right now. And so that's what everything on that character district map is about. And when you get up and mingle with the pages, you'll see there's definitions of those. And all these different matrices that you see around, you'll see that they're organized around the character district. So if you want to know, well, what kind of homes are they proposing in a character district, you'll see a matrix that has all the character districts on the left, all the different housing types as columns, and you'll see them match up. What kind of non-residential buildings might be allowed? What type of open space elements are we advocating for? We even get down to signage. I will almost be on my 50th plan over 26 years in 19 states. This is the first one we've talked about signage in, right? So you're a first for me. Thank you for that. As part of it, though, we're not trying to write your sign code. That's for the UDO to do, right? But what we are trying to do is say there are certain places where you're making signage for an automobile that's driving by much faster, and what do they appreciate, and how large do things need to be. And then there are places we're trying to create from character that are meant to be walkable, and that should be your primary mode. So when you're in downtown, you don't need 80 square feet of sign. You need something that looks really nice on a building, whether it's on the wall or it's a blade sign coming off. And so we're recognizing there's a role in your signage even. As you continue around, and now you've made the corner, we also applied some of these words, these big recommendations, and tested them in 3 different areas. And you'll be able to learn more about those as we go through. But basically on the top right most is what we call the triangle. So this is coming in on Business 1 off of Regular 1, where the flyover is right now. I think it's the Shell stations there, and then you get the satisfaction of seeing the storage. What's Pinnacle Storage? Yep, sorry. Pinnacle Storage is on your left, and then you get to Sly Fox, and I mean, there's like, you know where I'm at, right? So that's that area if you want to kind of see like what would be one dream that would be there. I want to be very clear for all the developers who might be in the room. We're very clear that we say in there, these are just concepts. This is not like a packaged approval. This isn't exactly what we want to see, but it's just testing ideas, just so everybody's aware. On property in there, and you're like, they drew all over my such and such. And I said, well, we're just testing ideas. This stuff can apply anywhere, and so we've got it to do that. Right behind, in the middle, we have the opportunities that might exist at Gaines in Pennsylvania. And again, there was this idea about maybe bringing some of the energy and balancing the energy on Pennsylvania Avenue on either side of one. And then as I have learned, you know, about the history and sort of the prominence of certain streets, we picked Gaines as the intersection, just as we looked at kind of how the world laid. But we also talk about all the synergy with the center, right? So we want to make sure that works out really well too, but we wanted to let them do a little bit of their thing because we know they're going through a master planning process and that kind of stuff. So it would be premature for us to get out in front of that and dictate that. So instead, we came in and called them a neighborhood activity center, but I'd like to see what they come up in their master plan, you know, so we're not telling them you have to do this, you have to do this. The planning process has to occur. Then on the very left-hand side, you see this is one of those transformation areas. So we're on Airport Road, getting close with Pinehurst. And that's that areas that we think, you know, when you look at utilities and you look at geography, look at the fact that the regional hospital's on the other side and all that energy going on, that might be a good place to think about it. And if you are, let's be very prescriptive in terms of describing what an intended outcome might be. So that's what that is as well, is looking at different options to build, again, what we called complete communities, remember? So it's got residential and non-residential, open spaces. If it's large enough, it might have civic destinations, maybe even a school location, those kind of things as well. So again, we just tested ideas there in chapter. I'd like to get reactions to that. As we come across to chapter 3, and we're really going to test your next ability, or just turn around if you want. This is recognizing the fact that everything we've talked about so far has created demand for service, right? So development densities, intensities, patterns, locations, the type of development, all needs to be served then, right? Water, sewer, schools, electricity, the list goes on and on. This chapter is all about making sure that we're set up to accommodate the growth that we've created. So I won't even ask for a show of hands, but I know that there's certain people in this community, certain people in this room are just like, it's not that I'm afraid of growth, it's just we're not prepared for it, right? The capacity, the supplies, and keeping up with the demand. That's what chapter 3 is all about. It's about trying to acknowledge what is needed in the future so we can either plan for it or we can ask for it, right? Because you have partners who provide some of these services, you might just be asking for it. But that's what this is all about. And so for each kind of sort of facet of infrastructure, we have a map, and that map shows kind of what the intentions might be. Now, those intentions are useful in 2 ways. One is they might say, hey, this is what we want to do for a capital project, like we talked about earlier. But the other thing might be, hey, here's a development application coming through, and look, we have a greenway shown in that area. We really think you should probably include a greenway in your project so we can start to implement this idea. So they're also there in order to evaluate things as well. So we have parks and greenways and trails, and we have what happens to the police department and the fire department and the water system and the sewer system. opportunity for transit, as well as what we look at for roads. Okay? And going back to these voting things, we pulled out all the words that talk about what should happen from an infrastructure standpoint in order to support the demand that's coming out too. So as part of that, when we break, start to react to some of these things and these phrases and see if you agree with them or you don't agree with them. We'd like to hear. And then again, we have the sticky notes here if you want to provide specific comments as we go. Then we get into chapter 4. This idea we call town-wide concepts. So these are things that would apply throughout the community. So we talked about in chapter 2 character districts, where we're getting specific. 4, we're presenting some ideas that really should be considered throughout the community. Now, they may land differently in different parts of the community, but these are ideas we have out there to really think as a whole. And so it's ideas like, here's a planner word for you, public realm. Don't worry about it. It's all the space in between. It's the trees, the streets, the parking lots, all that kind of stuff. There are great opportunities to create consistency and character when you think about the spaces between the buildings. And so if that resonates with you, react to some of these sentences. What type of mix of land uses and what type of development intensities will achieve some of the goals we had in chapter 2? We talk about that from a town-wide perspective. This is really important because we taught, infill development, and a lot of you said, that's great, but man, it's really like, I get nervous when it's the property next door to me, right? It makes me nervous. So we said, okay, let's address it head on. If you're going to do infill development, how is it compatible and how does it transition so that it looks like it was meant to be? So we have a section on that. Different home and neighborhood choices. Again, there's a lot of variety within this community, and so let's talk about it and what demands it addresses. This whole idea of missing middle, and really as we get from chapter 4 and into chapter 5, a lot of input about some of the multifamily projects that have been coming in and some of the very large multifamily projects that have been coming in. And we've set some terms on that. So we've set if it's a standalone project, how many units really should it be to fit a character before you need to go into one of the activity centers that are in the growth choices map. So that's the kind of stuff we kind of set some rules there and some expectations as we go. And that kind of stuff's talked about in the home and neighborhood choices and the missing middle. Also tried to talk about good design of a new development as well as scale. So for those of you who may be disappointed, I have no 20-story buildings in your plan. So I'm sorry. But we do talk about, I knew I could get applause here, but what is the right scale? Like how tall are we talking about, right? Let's just be intentional and say it out loud within the comprehensive plan. So that's there. This idea about creating green space that's connected and meaningful. Just like you connect 2 streets to make it more efficient, let's connect 2 green spaces together to be more efficient, either to multiply and have more critical mass or to connect a greenway system like we have on those maps as we go through. So there's some ideas there for you to react to. This idea about getting transportation and land use better coordinated. This goes back to the congestion issue people are complaining about. Well, there are ways to solve that on a land use side and a transportation side. So we have some of those ideas as well. And then I love, because this was organic and kind of came out of the planning process, but this idea about natural, cultural, and historic resources and ways to protect them and how to remember that you are, within the pines. So there's a lot of powerful statements in there about that we'd like you to react to as well. So again, red and green dots as we go through. All right, chapter 5 is written as a way to put those 77 and the like together. Place. The reason they're numbered is because this makes life for staff much easier when they're looking for consistency. So when you're trying to say, does this plan or project, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? This is one of the first places they'll go to, are all these different policies and the like. So again, we've set this up so you can react to these words, but I will tell you, and for those of you who have read the draft document already, sometimes this policy sentence doesn't do justice to really what the intent is. So we've got 3 copies of chapter 5 that are on the tables. And if you want to look at, well, what does it mean to say, review and update the comprehensive regularly, policy 1.2, you can go to chapter 5 and there's probably 5 or 6 sentences about what that means. Now that one's more intuitive, but when you get into some of these about, rethink commercial corridors in the community's walkable, mixed, have a different idea of what that means, right? Just by saying that policy. But when you read the paragraphs underneath it that are in these 3 copies of the plan, it'll make a lot more sense of what our intentions were. And again, if there's a policy you really like or a policy that really you feel threatened by, let us know through the sticker exercise. For those of you who have read the document already, you know this is where I really made my money, because chapter 6 only has 1 paragraph in it right now, right? So that's intentional. The reason it's intentional is because this chapter takes its direction specifically from all 5 chapters in front of it. And so if we make a change here, it's going to be reflected in our implementation chapter, right? So when we're in this process, it's did we get it right? And then once we have it right, chapter 6 will show up in that public hearing draft. That's August 4th-ish, I think is where we're at. So there will be more meat on the bones for chapter 6 in the next version that comes out. But because we're, building the airplane while a little bit, we want to do stuff in the open as we can. And so to that end, we have right now some of these ideas that are rising to the top, but we want your reactions to those. So we've created a matrix where we've actually pulled out, and we call these our short-term projects. So these would be ones you'd want to implement soon if you can. Soon being 0 to 5 years. I mean, in terms of my timeline. Anything in a medium might be 6 to 10, and anything long-term is 11 to 20 or beyond, just so we're all on the same page. So these are things that you want to see happen in the next 5 years. And there's actually 7 of them now. If you look at the flag in the corner, I just didn't want to cover up the door with a table. So there's one more up there. Don't skip it. But I just didn't want to put a table in front of the door in case we had to make a quick exit. But go ahead and react to these statements and let us know which ones you really agree, yeah, that's a good short-term goal, and which ones you're like, resonate with me. That would be a red dot as you go through the process. That's the last chapter document that we have so far. It is being kind of written as we go. But again, when we do the public hearing draft, it'll be out in all its glory for what it is for you to react to. All right, that's the document. So I'm going to finish coming around and come back to the front. And we can go ahead and do some question and answers. And like I said, I'm happy to take questions. I do want to make sure, though, that there might be a point in time, depending how long we want to go, that I'm like, I need you to react to this stuff as well, so I'll just hang out and we can have conversations all night if you want to. But who's first? Who's dying to ask something?
I have a question. You put a lot of effort and time into creating this tonight. Is this the only night where this will be available?
No, it's a good question. So tomorrow, all of this, sure. So the question was, and I'm going to start with hopefully what was a compliment. A lot of effort went into this, and we're really excited about it, but like, how does it live on than just today, right? And the response to that question is, we have it's going to have to be a little bit slimmed down just because of room size, but literally behind this TV is another print run of all of this for tomorrow. So we'll have it all set up for the 8 hours tomorrow at the train station. And then we'll have it all this. It's a shame we have to reset it up again in the same room, but in August 2nd, we are going to set this up again for the office hours that will occur there from 9 to 5. August 2nd at the Douglas Center, yes. Well, that's a office hours event here, same room. No, tomorrow is the train station.
Tomorrow's the train station. The other office hours are what day?
August 2nd. So those will be the 2 times that we have all of this up. Now, one of the ideas is and sometimes I just surprise staff with this, but one of the ideas is maybe we can take just the voting boards, and we can have them at the planning department or something. So if like you want to come in and read the paper copy that's available at the planning department, I saw it with my own eyes, I know it's there, and you're like, as I look through this, I'd like to put a green dot or a red dot to join up everybody else. We might look for ways to do that as well in between the events. It'll keep the boards in better shape anyways. Sure, you can do anything online, right? I'd have to figure it out. I'd have to figure out the how, but I'll do an A for effort. The question was, could we replicate this online? Surely there's a way, but I'd have to figure out how. No, the reason I say, and I'm just being very honest with everybody, the website that we have, just like a lot of communities, it's like hosted as like a template toolkit, widgets and stuff. So I would just have to see if there's a widget that would allow people to vote. And if there is, then I'll do it. If there's not, maybe we come up with a plan B. But yeah, you're right, because we had 4,500 hits, so people might value that. Let me think through that a little bit and see what I can do. Other questions or comments? Me?
Those two events you're talking about at the train station and here just seems to be just walk around and put dots on or leave little sticky notes. It won't be so much of a discussion or presentation, will it?
No, I think it will. So those of you who attended we did 5 office hour events for the Growth Choices workshop. And actually the reason we brought them back was people loved them. And so if you want to sit down, because I'm sitting there, some people stayed 30 minutes. I think there were some people going for the award. I mean, maybe what, an hour or more? Yeah, that people just stayed and hung out. And it's a chance to talk to us, but it's also a chance to talk among your neighbors, which is pretty cool as well. So no, it is meant to be not a formal presentation, but we just have conversations about the document all day.
And I have other questions.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed as I went around, everything's stated in a positive statement. Like, don't you want more greenways? Wouldn't you like some general planning of this or that? If you look at it, every sentence is a positive statement, which everyone can go along with and say, yeah, I want that. How many houses do you think, or homes, dwelling units will be coming with this plan?
Well, again, we're planning for up to 8,000 people coming.
8,000. So 8,000 buildings or 8,000 people?
No, well, unless you tell me, does each of you want to have your own house? I don't think so, right? We live as families and the like, so no. So no, those are 8,000 people.
8,000 people. How many dwellings? How many homes? The reason I ask this is one statistic I saw in recent years was every house has about 8 car trips per day. So if you have 8,000 homes times 8, that's 64,000 more cars every day.
Right, but that's you using math to your benefit because it's 8,000 people, not 8,000 dwelling units. So what we could do is we could pull the average person per household. I'm sorry, it was in one of the book reports in February. I could pull that. You divide it out, that's how many homes you end up getting. Right. It has it on there? Okay, I can look at it. So from scenario A, remember that was one of the things we looked at is how many lots are just out there hanging out? And it was almost 1,200 total. Well, and then we're also looking at there's the 3 areas. Well, no, there's the 3 areas that are in blue in the north we can look at and the like. But it's more than 1,200 homes, but it's not 8,000 homes. Right. Other questions, just to make sure we let everyone. What?
How many people want major expansion in this area? Show of hands?
Well, actually, I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, let me have this meeting. Okay.
How many positive statements, and when you go, all gonna sound lovely, and you're gonna have green dots everywhere. But do you realize what's gonna happen here? The price
Well,
of
okay.
real estate here is gonna explode.
This in Congress for your phone. In Congress, when you were doing the planning there, how did you deal with your questions there?
Well, I asked these questions, and,
Because we really appreciate your feedback immensely. And I've been to the various little sessions he's talking about, and they're extremely interactive. And then the questions you're asking, oh my God, I'm from here. I really care very deeply about it. So maybe let the people that are actually from here ask a few questions.
Okay.
That might be beneficial.
that'll be great. I just wanna say this one thing. When they came to Pinehurst, exact same business, happens to be urban planners that came to our suburban town. First thing they did was propose 3 new downtown business districts. When I came to the first meeting here, they were proposing 3 new downtown business districts. So how much building up do you want? And one of my major concerns is their interest in building up this area, because I think they're gonna price out the people who can currently afford to live here. They won't be able to afford the new buildings that are built. And they'll start buying up as much as they can of any of the other houses. And
Okay.
I just want.
All right, so who else has a question? Let me just see who else has a question. Go ahead.
We have to be realistic. We are going to grow, whether we want to or not. Those businesses and those computer businesses stuff in Raleigh, they used to drive an hour and a half to get to work because it was like in LA or somewhere. They're happy to drive 45 minutes, an hour to come down here. So if we know it's gonna happen, I think we're smart to try to get our hands on the reins before it gets out of control. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, we can break and interact with the different chapters as well. Sir?
Question, and that's other than sticky notes and going to the office hours and stuff like that, how do we actually provide positive feedback other than those channels, like email?
Yes, yeah, great question, because I may have glossed over it. So if you go on to southernpineclrp.net and you scroll to the bottom, it says if you can't make any of the events, to send an email. If you send an email, it'll go, again, Rachel in the back of the room, but copy me on it, because I don't want any loss in translation. And our email addresses are right in there. They were in the pilot article as well. Thank you for doing that. And so just send us emails directly. And it could be either broad statements, or it's like, on page 108, this really makes me uncomfortable. I would suggest this. All comments are welcome as we go through that process. All right, so should we break? Because we'll be around all night. So just start to interact with the boards and let us know if you have any questions.